I want your loving and the loving your band's going down. Got in a bad romance. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading pages 81 to 100. And as of recording this, I kind of realized something. This is going to be the second to final episode where I record this as a how do you say child? Because I'm going to college soon. And as such, I might not have the same audio recording. The future recordings might sound a little strange. Just FYI. Unless I change it, of course, but that's besides the point. Yeah, I just wanted to warn you guys, just in case. Like, hey, why did the audio change? That's why. But yeah, let's stop dawdling on things that are insignificant. And now, let's begin. Because Mr. Jansen, the bus driver, always been looking out for him, Reed didn't miss the bus. He made a total fool of himself, waving his arm around and shouting as Mr. Jansen started to pull away from the curb, but he got the driver's attention. Mr. Jansen stopped the bus a few feet from the curb and opened up the bus's doors. The driver of one of the buses farther down the row behind Reed's bus honked. Stumbling up the stairs under the bus, Reed gasped, thanks to Mr. Johnson, who shook his gray-haired head and winked at Reed. Cutting it close, my boy. Cutting it close. Reed sucked in some air. Sorry. Life happens, Mr. Jansen said. We adjust. We smiled at Reed. Take your seat. Reed scanned the interior of the bus. One of the cheerleaders gave him a disgusted look. Reed ignored her and looked for Shelley and Pickle. He knew they'd be back on the bus, and he knew to save them a seat. Keeping gaze on his feet in the aisle scuffed rubber flooring, and Reed hurried to his friends. He slid next to Pickle. As soon as Reed's butt hit the hard maroon vinyl seat, Mr. Jansen released the brakes. The bus hissed, hurched, rumbled away from the school. Reed looked at Pickle's nose. It was hard not to. Red but swollen, smeared with blood. Pickle's nose was more prominent than ever. Now he had a little white tissue roll sticking out of each nostril. Given that the nose was peaky, Pickle looked like a big bird sucking up white worms. Does it hurt? Reed asked. Pickle, as usual, was doing some type of numbers puzzle. He glanced up at Reed. Huh? Reed pointed at his nose. Pickle made a funny cross-eyed face in an attempt to look at the injured beak. Reed suppressed a smile. Pickle shrugged. Yeah, not the first time, though. I can ignore it. Sorry. Why? What did you do? Nothing. Pickle returned to his puzzle. Reed glanced at Shelley. She was reading, also as usual. The glass smelled diesel exhaust, sweat, peanuts, and bubblegum. His engine sounded like the content snore of a sleeping dragon. The sound helped tension and adrenaline drain from Reed's system. The bus gained speed and turned out the school's driveway onto the road. Reed looked out the window. The high school was tucked in the back of an older neighborhood, so the first few blocks that they left the school were big trees and pretty green lawns. Reed usually liked looking at the greenery. He would stare at the lawns with envy. His front yard was mostly dirt. Today, Reed wasn't really seeing anything he was looking at. He was back in the robotics classroom with Julius. His mind was focused on Julius, locked into his exoskeleton, Julius' face nearly purple with rage. In the Dark Ages, Shelley said, hash torture was commonly used to punish those who broke the law. Reed flinched. What? He turned to stare at Shelley. As always, she sat back behind Pickle and Reed. Her massive backpack with extra book bag took up the rest of the seat. Did she know what he'd done? Her attention on the book, Shelley continued. When someone violated civil law, torture would be done to the town square. Public display was the consequences for lawlessness thought to be a deterrent. Oh, she was reading. Of course she was. She loved to share what she was learning, and often read aloud on the bus and at home and at lunch and in the hallways at school. She read pretty much everywhere. Today she was reading her history homework. Shelley was an AP World History because she read so many history books outside of school that she was beyond the normal history curriculum. She wasn't just a science geek, she was an information geek. Reed relaxed his shoulders, returned his attention to the window. When they left behind the neighborhood, the bus route ran along the main drag lined up the strip malls and car dealerships. Reed liked this stretch too, because he enjoying the cars. He liked to imagine himself driving them, and he picked a different make and model every day. Concentrating, he put himself in the wheel of a bright yellow Mustang. Shelley's voice, however, ruined his fancy. Torture was very creative in the Middle Ages, Shelley read. They came up with truly morbid ways of inflicting excruciating pain. The Judas cradle, for example, impaled a seated victim for several days, which blood-curdling names like the Beast Ripper and the Peer of Anguish. Medieval torture devices were a testament to human ingenuity. Torture. Was what I did to Julius torture? Reed's chest tightened. Yeah, it probably was, being stuck in at least a mild form of torture, especially in the exoskeleton with no way to move or eat or drink or get to the bathroom. It was a Judas cradle. but it wasn't nice either. After the malls and car lots, their bus route wound through the industrial park. When it passed a farm before returning to the newer subdivision. Most of the bus stops were the subdivision was stuffed full of houses that, though good size, mostly looked alike. Reed didn't care about the houses, so he stopped registering individual things, so he just saw blurs of color. And Julius stuck in that metal framework. Reed's dad, who did the best he could to be a single dad to Reed and his sister, Alexa, was fond of saying that you shouldn't solve a problem at the level of the problem. Reed wasn't a genius like his friends, but he was smart enough to know it meant lowering himself to the level of Julius's meanness wasn't the way to handle the jerk. But still, after Julius did the pickle, wasn't that justification enough to lock Julius into an exoskeleton he was so proud of? And what was Julius did to Reed about locking Reed into his exoskeleton? Didn't Julius deserve to get a taste of his own medicine? Reed started unwinding his muscles again. Yeah, what he did wasn't so bad, it was justice. The bus went through the pothole and everyone popped out the seats in a nanosecond. When they all landed again, Shelley poked Reed's shoulder. He turned to look at her. Listen to this, she said. You won't believe this. What? Reed said. Pickle said nothing. He kept linking in the answers to his puzzle. One of the most commonly used forms of torture was called the wheel. Shelley read from her thick, musty-smelling book. Those condemned to being constrained in this way had prolonged torture ahead of them. They were held in place, unable to free themselves. Reed stared at Shelley. What was she doing? Was she messing with him? Held in place, unable to free themselves? It sounded like she was talking about Julius. Maybe she knew what he'd done after all, but how? It was sometimes called the breaking wheel, Shelley read on. Reed blew out air. No, she didn't know what she was doing. The coincidence that he was reading about torture devices. They called it that, she continued, because they were used to crush the bones of the condemned. Ew, huh? Shelley looked at Reed with wide eyes. Then she turned to gaze at the book and read on. The device was designed to torture the lasting over multiple days. The wheel was made up of many radical spokes, and a person subjected to the ties of the whole wheel before the club or cudgel was used to beat their limbs. This process reduced the human to being a mutilated bag of bones, and an onlooker described it as a writhing, mourning monster with bloody tentacles. That's gross, Pickle said without looking at his puzzle. Totally, Reed agreed. He didn't try not to think about what Julius was experiencing now. But hey, at least Julius wasn't tied to a medieval torture device, right? Julius was restrained, and as time passed, he'd be uncomfortable. And he wasn't in any pain. No one was standing over and beating him with a cudgel, whatever that was. He was just trapped. Shelley continued to read about medieval torture, but Reed turned her out. He turned back toward the window and the bus had stopped at the corner. He watched the mom holding hands with a little kid who had a red balloon. The balloon bobbed in the air, following the little kid's movements because it was tied to the kid's wrist. Reed thought of the Julius' big wrist. Maybe he would go back to school and unlock the exoskeleton after their study session this evening. A few hours would be enough to punish Julius for his nastiness. That way Julius would learn his lesson, but Reed wouldn't stop at the level of torture. Yeah, that was what Reed would do. Except how would he get away from Julius before Julius tried to kill him? Reed chewed his lower lip. He sat up straight and smiled. He knew he just could do. He unlocked one of Julius's hands, then jumped back and run before Julius could grab him. Julius, stiff in confinement, would have to take at least half a minute to unlock his wrists and ankles, and in that time Reed would be far enough away to hide. Once Julius was gone, Reed would go home. And after that, well, he'd deal with that when the time came. But until then, he was going to get some good food at Gerard's house and hang out with his friends. He was going to put Julius out of his mind and enjoy the rest of free time that day. He deserved it. Just like Julius deserved what was happening to him. Reed loved his dad, and he knew his dad did everything he could to give Reed and Lexa a good home. But his dad was, well, his dad. He knew nothing about a good home was. He couldn't cook, he couldn't clean. He thought decoration was a calendar with fish photos on it with a few sports team schedules. When Reed was home, he never really felt at home, not like he did here at the Gerard house. Reed sprawled on his thick, soft gray rug in front of the stone hearth. A slow-burning fire sputtered in the grate. Thios, exhausted from a rousing game of chase the tennis ball, was now stretched out on the cool tiles of the nearby entryway, adding the satisfied snores of the flame staccato popping. The sounds were both rhythmic and soothing. Reed's belly was full of spicy chicken wings, jalapeno poppers, potato skids, homemade pot pie, and chocolate chip cookies. He was so relaxed he wished he would take a nap. You kids have everything you need before I head to my class? Miss Gerard asked. She took an hard way between the family room and the entryway, tugging on a floppy yellow rain hat. Reed turned and looked over his shoulder, though at the French doors of Gerard's heavily treed backyard. Yep, it was raining, a steady but light spring rain. The sky looked shiny and pink with the twilight. Reed craned his neck in to see the western horizon. He liked looking at the sun when it was getting ready to the nighttime. Tonight, the sun was a fuzzy, bright orange tinge of purple. He looked back at Miss Gerard. Thanks for the snacks and for the dinner, too. Miss Gerard smiled and tucked her shoulder-length dark hair under the rain hat. She shrugged her short, plump body into her slicker and said, You're welcome, as always, Reed. We love having you here. She snapped her slicker closed and closed at her own kids, who were all obvious in her impending departure. Shelley, reclining her overstuffed navy blue sofa, had her nose buried in some thick history book she had been reading on the bus, Pickle sat across the leg in the lad's blue tweed recliner, bending so low over his own book it looked like he was trying to dive into it. Reed couldn't see what Pickle was reading. The third Gerard kid, 6-year-old Ori, had been playing video game, but now he was picking up a remote for Pickle's robot skeleton. Kids, Miss Gerard yelled. All three of the children looked up. Miss Gerard shook up their head and smiled. I'm leaving. You kids behave. And Pickle, ice that nose again in an hour or so. Huh? Pickle said. Miss Gerard shook her head. I'll remind him, Reed said. Pickle's nose was looking much better, particularly Miss Gerard as matter-of-factly treated Pickle's nose the second they got home. Examining it, she declared it bruised, not broken. And she cleaned it up, applied some kind of herbal cream, and then given Pickle an ice pack and balanced it on his face. Pickle resisted that he couldn't eat or read with the pack on his nose, but he didn't have to leave it on for long. Soon, he was eating snacks along with everyone else, and he declared the double chocolate cookies Miss Gerard brought out after dinner healing cookies, because his nose stopped hurting after he ate them. Now, after studying her beaky son for a second, Miss Gerard looking at Reed. What would you have do without you, Reed? Miss Gerard smiled at them and then turned back to their kids. Bye, kids. Love you, Mom, Shelley said. Bye, Pickle and Ori said in unison. Thanks again, Miss Gerard. Bye, Reed said. Bye, all, Miss Gerard said. Come on, Thales. Thales was already on his feet. Standing next to Miss Gerard's leg, his tail whipped as fast as slapping her thigh. Miss Gerard's class was his class too, and he was learning to be a therapy dog. Miss Gerard thought not the source of her children's brilliance was no brain slosh. She went to all sorts of classes. She seemed to have a lot of interest, and she always joined the conversation with her kids or babbling about their homework or projects. But the Gerard's brains came mostly from Mr. Gerard. He was a retired electrical engineer who did counseling for the big companies. He traveled a lot. He was gone now, but when he was here, he was a hands-on dad. He was cool. Shelley and Pickle had returned to their books before the front door shut behind Miss Gerard. Only pressed a button in remote control, and Pickle's robot skeleton stood up and slid before a few inches, or his eyes lit up. Or was a conglomeration of his siblings, which made him not as cute as Shelley, but much cuter than Pickle. His face still round and a little pudgy. Ori still had Shelley's large eyes and long lashes and full mouth. He had his brother's nose. On Ori, the big nose was more amusing than ugly. He looked a little like a baby bird. 6 years old. Oh, could rock a look like that. Ori wouldn't have to worry about looks for a while. Ori bent over the remote, so intent that he nearly touched it with his long nose. Little robot skeleton scooted forward some more. Ori laughed. Reed glanced at Pickle. Pickle either didn't know the brother was playing with the project or he didn't care. Probably if Ori damaged the thing in a way, Pickle could easily fix it. Reed looked at his own pathetic project. He was supposed to be working on it. He had been of off and on all afternoon. He hadn't made much progress though. Reed had chosen an electric motor in his actuator because his dad knew how to build a motor and was excited to help him. The part of the project, along with the connecting a battery-powered motor with exoskeleton circuitry, was done okay. But the problem Reed had now was the skeleton structure. As always, he would visualize how to construct the form. Every time he attached a new metal component to the skeleton, he ended up with something that stuck out at a natural angle. And then he turned it into making it fit. The joint didn't work properly. Right now, the exoskeleton looked mangled and backward. That wasn't good. Reed sighed and gazed at the cozy room. Even though the Gerard family room was big and had high ceilings, it was warm and inviting. Kind of like a cocoon filled with comfortable soft furniture. A couple tables, multiple shelves stuffed with books and games, colorful art and tidy play area for Ori, a big microfiber covered bed for Thales in the fireplace, and a huge TV movie night of the radio games. The room was perfect for hanging out. It wasn't so bad for doing homework either. You might be well comfortable while you're doing something you didn't want to do. The week before, the family room got an addition that intrigued Reed. It was a miniature house, a replica of the Gerard home, standing at about 3 feet tall and stretching about 4 feet wide. The house required the removal of one ottoman in the room, but otherwise it would fit just fine. Mr. Gerard built the house for Shelley when she was decorating to look exactly like the family's real house. Do you want me to help you with that? Pickle asked. Huh? Reed looked over at his friend. Pickle marked his book, which Reed would know was in advanced engineering mathematics. You sighed. Pickle said, and your exoskeleton looks like it's being built by a blind man without opposite thumbs. I wondered if you wanted some help. Reed threw a gear at Pickle. Pickle didn't mean to be mean. He was brilliant in his own matter-of-fact kind of way. Well, I was sorry he was okay to hang out with, even though he was super smart. Pickle never made Reed feel dumb. When he made a comment like that one, Reed knew Pickle wasn't making fun of him. Pickle was just making an observation. I'll muddle through, thank you. You might try angling the joints to the left and right limbs move on the same, or at least similar ways, unless you're building an alien exoskeleton. Thank you, Mr. Obvious, Reed said. He made a face. Maybe I am building an alien exoskeleton. Cool. Pickle shrugged and turned to his book. Shelley looked up from hers. What? Reed laughed. My exoskeleton is an alien. Shelley rolled her eyes and returned to reading. Ori laughed. Reed turned to see if the kid was laughing at Reed. He wasn't. He was forwardly focused on the robot's remote. Pickle, robotic skeleton, plowed through the hearth with a loud crunch. Pickle didn't look up from his book. Ori back to the 7-inch skeleton started spinning in a circle. Reed began to consider Pickle's offer. He was pretty sure Pickle had built the little robotic skeleton in a day. Maybe he could help Reed salvage his project. Seriously, look at the thing move, Reed thought. He shook his head, and the little robotic skeleton is whipped in tight circles. He sucked in his breath and sat up. How could he have forgotten what happened in class today? Well, to be fair, a lot have happened since class. The confrontation with Julius, along with Reed's resulting uncharacteristic bursts of nerve, and pretty much acted like a brain wipe for the rest of the day. All Reed could do was think about Julius locked in an exoskeleton. But now he remembered, Julius has been complaining about Pickle's remote was affecting Julian's exoskeleton, and Julius was now locked in that metal frame. His body inextricably linked to the structure, and therefore inextricably linked to his movement. What if it could crash into something in the way Pickle's robot had crashed into the hearth? What if it was spinning in circles right now? Hey, Pickle, Reed kept his gaze on the gyrating metal skeleton. Huh? Pickle looked at Reed. That thing. Reed pointed at the remote Ori's small hands. Does that thing have much range, right? Pickle sniffed. It's pretty great range, actually. I designed the remote to function through walls. That's why I combined the IR and RF. So it's controlling something outside the house. How far would the range be? Reed asked. Pickle frowned. You mean if the skeleton was outside and Ori was inside? Reed nodded. Yeah. Sure, that's what he meant. He didn't mean if the remote was controlling Julius's exoskeleton. No, he didn't mean that at all. Pickle tilted his head and thought about it. It might reach a few feet outside the house. Maybe, honestly. I've never checked. It probably doesn't reach beyond the house. The outer walls would be thicker than the inside walls. More inference. Oh, Reed said, attempting to sound uninterested, even though he had asked the question. Okay. Reed tugged at his shirt and then was sticking out a suddenly sweaty skin. He suppressed a sigh of relief. Pickle leaned forward. Why'd you ask? Ori now had the robotic skeleton racing through the room and dizzying serpentine routines around the furniture. Reed tried not to imagine Julius zipping around the robotics room in a similar fashion. If he was doing it in a suit, what Pickle's robot was doing here, Julius would be bashing the walls and furniture. He'd be, at least, badly bruised. More likely, he'd broken bones. Oh man, Reed thought, that might be truly torturing Julius. Reed? Reed looked at Pickle. He was suddenly elated at his friend's genius in extended reading minds, and he was also glad that Pickle also sucked in deciphering facial expressions, body language, and other social cues. Reed was sure to deliberately blank face was as effective as he wanted to be. He was trying to be innocent, but he had a feeling he looked like Thales did when the dog stole a cookie and trying to pretend he didn't. Oh, I was just curious, Reed said. It's impressive, that's all. Pickle raised a thick black eyebrow. Okay. Pickle might not have been able to read personal visual cues, but his brain was like an auto recorder. He remembered everything he had ever heard or read. He was going to go through the database and subtracting everything Reed had ever said to him before today with just Reed just said. Reed had never before told Pickle that something he'd done was impressive. He also so used to Pickle outperforming everyone around him that praising Pickle for doing something as well was like praising him for breathing. Pickle definitely found Reed's last comment strange. Pickle opened his mouth and he was going to ask a question, but Ori saved Reed. He plowed Pickle's exoskeleton inside of Shelly's miniature house. Metal hit the wood, hiding with a thud, and Shelly sat up on the sofa. She stuck a bookmark in her book, clearly already confronting her little brother. Before he could do that or say anything, though, Ori backed up a robotic skeleton and ran it forward again. He giggled and repeated the action, bumping a little robot into the miniature house over and over. Shelly jumped up. Hey, Ori, stop it! He's not going to hurt it, Pickle said. Let him play with it. I'm not worried about your robot, Shelly said. He's going to hurt my house, and he's going to mess up my project. Shelly started toward Ori, who giggled and darted away from her. Shelly chased Ori, but he easily stayed ahead of her. He continued to play with the remote at the same time. The little robot kept butting in the house. Ori, you little twerp, Shelly said. I'm going to break your sibling Viniculum if you don't cut that out. Viniculum was one of the daily words of the previous week. It meant bond. That one stuck in Reed's head because he thought when Shelly defined the word, that would mean like deeper vinculum with her. Ori, if you ruin my project, what project? Reed asked. He didn't care. He was trying to distract himself from thoughts about Julius, and if he was controlled by Pickle's remote, was probably being slammed to the wall in the classroom right now. Or what he was being slammed to something sharp, like one of Mrs. Billing Robotics' arms. Could Julius get impaled? It's a project for my psychology class about family dynamics, Shelly said, bending and lunging for her little brother. Seriously, Shell? It's okay, Pickle said. The robot isn't going to hurt the house. He was going to have any sharp edges. Pickle set aside the book and scrambled out of the dad's chair. He went over to where the robot was stacking the house over and over, leaning forward and pointing at the tiny rough pieces overlapping wood when he was gray shingle siding in the real house. And he said, see? Not a scratch. Shelly stopped pursuing Ori. He came back to the miniature house, knelt down and examined it. Oh, she shrugged and returned to the sofa. Okay. She picked up the torch, her book, and presumably returned to the medieval torture. What if Julius had been tortured right now? What if he'd been battered pretty badly before everyone Pickle's robot was doing? Pickle sat down on the floor and sat in Shelly's house, and he reached the snatched up robot. Ori, desist for a second. Ori shoved his lower lip. But I wanna, he began to whine. I'm not gonna take it away from you, Pickle assured his brother. I'm gonna make it more fun. Pickle held up his metal skeleton, which was whirring in an effort to respond to remote's commands. Ori's lower lip returned to the normal position. He stopped playing with the remote, and his face brightened. Yeah? What are you going to do? He came over, sat next to Pickle. I've got something cool to show you, Pickle said. Something else you can do with this. Pickle put down his robot, and he nudged Ori. So watch this, Pickle whispered. Pickle flipped a switch on the little robot. Now try it, Pickle said to Ori. Ori grinned and pushed a button in the remote. The robot stood in a blockish head. What did you just do? Reed asked Pickle. Oh, I just turned off the joint constraints, so now my robot can go against logical joint directions too, like yours, only on purpose. Or really beautifully push the buttons and toggle the joystick and remote. The little robot flipped off its head and turned into a metal contortionist. It started crawling across the floor like an octopus, its joints wrapping in impossible pretzel-like shapes. Looking at once like it was turning itself inside out, it was expanding and contracting the way a beating heart did. The robot became a fluid, it resembled a snake. Or directed the robot into the entry area. It clicked and clicked over the slate and undulated across the floor. Reed stared at it, his throat constricting. In his head, instead of the sound of robot metal limbs contacting the hard floor, Reed could hear the snaps and pops of breaking bones. Julius breaking bones. The sounds were in his head, weren't they? He was imagining it, not hearing it, right? No, of course, he wasn't hearing it. How about he could hear it? Pickle said the robot's range wouldn't reach much beyond the George's house, and even if that happened, Reed wouldn't be able to hear it. His ears weren't superhuman, they were miles from the school, and if his mind were telling him to hear Julian's bone banks, his mind was lying. Reed's fears were so stupid, he couldn't believe his mind was coming up with stuff it was asinine. There was no way Pickle's remote would have impact on Julius's framework, therefore he was having no impact on Julius. So why did Reed feel so rotten? Why is his stomach in his throat? Why did he feel like he might throw up all the food he'd eaten? Did he intuitively know something? Was his intuition right about and his logic wrong? Reed took a deep breath and started an exoskeleton. Focus, he told himself. Stop imagining all that stupid stuff. Reed leaned over his project, tried to concentrate on his exoskeleton joints, but he couldn't. Or was having just too much fun with Pickle's robot. Now the boy was making things arrive all over the place. He was practically dancing with glee. Pickle turned to his dad's easy chair and picked up his book. Shelley is still lost in her own reading. Or started to make robots assault Shelley's house again. Shelley glanced up, but apparently comforted by Pickle's assurance, she placidly returned to her book. Reed scrambled off the floor. He had enough. I'll be back, he said. I have to do something. Or ignored him, continuing to aim the flopping robot at Shelley's house. Pickle looked up in his book. Where are you going? I have to do something, Reed repeated. What? Pickles asked. What would Reed say? What would he say? Would he say, hey, Stonesy, you're reading 2 more extra pages? Or, something around those lines that makes sense. I apologize. That was my B. What wasn't my B was that today we read pages 81 to 100. 81 to 102, which was, again, my B. And next time we're going to be rating pages 101 to 13. 13? Of course, I'm kidding. We're reading pages 101 to 132. At least we understand why it's called the breaking wheel now. That's interesting, huh? Although, I can't figure out why this is Five Nights at Freddy's related. Ain't that a little weird that this is a Five Nights at Freddy's book? This just seems like another horror story. What isn't a horror story is something you should be expecting, which is the... Reading Corner of the Day. Doing it up Stonesy's way, bop. Today we are learning about the English Springer Spaniel. Now, something very interesting about the English Springer Spaniel that I know is I actually know a English Springer Spaniel in real life. His name is Bandit. He's very nice. And he's named Bandit because he looks like he has masks like those old Batman movies with Adam West. So, yeah. It's fun that I actually know a real-life English Springer Spaniel, I would like to say. Asides from that, we are going to need to know about the silly little long doggy that we have in front of us. So the history of the English Springer Spaniel is that as the Spaniels became increasingly specialized, the larger land Spaniels had ranged farther afield, became extremely useful at flushing or springing game. Before the advent of shotguns, the game was flushed into nets and then chased by falcons and greyhounds. The first reference of Springers referred to the land Spaniels in the late 1500s. Around 1800, distinct strains of carefully bred Springers began to develop. One of the best known were those bred by the Duke of Norfolk. His dogs were so heavily influenced by the breed that for a while the breed was called Norfolk Spaniels. The name was changed to Springer Spaniel in 1900. The matter was complicated by the fact that the larger Springer and smaller Cocker Spaniels were simply size variations of the same breed. Only in 1902 did the English Kennel Club, EKC, recognize the Springer was a distinct breed. In America, the American Spaniel Club was formed in 1880 and began the task of separating the Springer and the Cocker sizes. After separation, the Springer continued to thrive. It remained popular. The hunters demanded a versatile gun dog that ranges fast and far that can also flush and retrieve. It is also a popular show dog and pet. So, now you know the history of this dog, so what's the temperament? I've met a dog like this in real life. I've even taken care of a dog like this in real life, so I could tell you a little more. But for the book's sake, what is the temperament of the English Springer Spaniel? Well, the temperament of the English Springer Spaniel is that the English Springer Spaniel is a cheerful, playful, and energetic, ready to play in the field and evening in the hearth. It does everything with gusto and can be overly enthusiastic unless given plenty of exercise. The typical Springer is the ideal family companion, which is interesting because the dog I know, that is the real-life English Springer Spaniel, is kind of playful and not very playful at all, so I guess that makes you wonder. Anyways, now you know this dog, so what's the upkeep? What do I have to do to keep this dog up and running? Well, the upkeep of the English Springer Spaniel is that, as an energetic and inquisitive dog, the Springer needs daily mental and physical exertion. Hunting is the first choice that satisfies both needs, but an outing in the field, a long walk on a leash, and good obedience lesson can go far from making the Springer a calm and well-behaved house dog. This breed does its best to allow to live in a house with access to a yard. His coat needs brushing or combing 1 to 2 times weekly, plus clipping and scissoring every 2 to 3 months. Springers from field rather than show lines tend to have less of a coat. So yeah, I believe this dog gets brushed. The dog I know gets brushed that much, but I could be wrong. Anyways, now if you are a child, please cover your ears, and if you are an adult or teenager, please get your notebooks out, because we are now going to learn about the health of the English Springer Spaniel. So the health concerns that we need to know of the English Springer Spaniel is that the major concerns are the otitis externa, CHD, and elbow dysplasia. So basically a lot of joint problems. Minor concerns are fructokinase deficiency, PRA, and rectal dysplasia. Can get blind easily, can get stomach problems really easily. Occasionally seen with atropine, Raynaud syndrome, seizures, gastric torsion, and patellar luxation. Those aren't ever good. And suggested tests are hip, elbow, eye, knee, and DNA for phosphofructokinase deficiency. Their lifespan is 10 to 14 years. Sad thing to know, but hey. So I don't have a family. I don't have kids, Stonesy. So what is this dog good for? Well, the form and function of the English Springer Spaniel is that the English Springer Spaniel is compactly built, upstanding with proud carriage, slightly longer than tall, but fairly long legs with deep body. Its build should suggest a combination of strength, agility, and endurance. A dog capable of hunting tirelessly under the most difficult of conditions. The outer coat is medium length, neither flat or wavy, and the undercoat is soft and dense. Its combination protects the dog from weather and water and thorns. The gait is long and ground covering. The expression, alert, kindly, and trusting, is an essential feature of the Springer type. Field-bred Springers tend to be lighter boned and have less coat, but have more variable patterning to show the bred Springers. So yeah, they're very fast, they're very outgoing. Now, for the final part of today's episode is the tier list. 5 is the best, 4 is better, 3 is average, 2 is below, 1 is the worst, and now you know. So, with that out of the way, the energy level for these dogs is a 3, so, you know, it's average. The exercise requirements and playfulness are at a 4, which kind of even each other out, so these dogs need a good amount of exercise. The affection level is at a 5, so they love you to the ends of the earth. The friendliness towards dogs is a 3, so make sure they don't get pissy. The friendliness towards other pets are at a 5, so they're good with anything else like cats. Friendliness towards strangers is a 4, so they're better than average. Ease of training is at a 5, so they're really easy to train. Watchdog ability is a 4, so they're pretty good at keeping an eye on things. Protection ability is at a 2, so again, not very protecting, but you're not going to get that till later. Their grooming requirements are at a 4, so I think it's one of the highest we've had so far. So they need grooming like every week or something like that. Their cold tolerance and heat tolerance are at a 3, so about average. And finally, the healthy weight for a male should be about 50 pounds, and for a female, about 40 pounds. The height of a male is 19 to 21 inches. I'm sorry, not pounds. And female should be 18 to 20 inches. Wow. Oh my goodness, I've seen this dog in a movie. The next type of spaniel we'll be reading about is one you'll learn about in the next episode, silly. So, yeah. I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. Be polite, be efficient, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going through pages and pages of spaniels. We're going to be reading about spaniels till I think this book is over. How many more spaniels do we have? We have next episode before that, after that, so 2, 3, and 4. We have 4 more spaniels to learn about. So yeah, we're not going to get done with spaniels till this book is done, which is fun to know. But yeah, what's also fun to know is that it's the end of the episode. Super fantastic, wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.